Hilchis Molachim Umilchamis Perik Shishi. Now the Shittas Rambam is that there's a din that when you go to Mulchama, you're supposed to be Pisech B'Sholem. Now other Rishonim hold, now there's a Rashi in Chumash says that chiyuv is only to those nations which are outside of Eretz Yisrael, to those Amim which are outside of Eretz Yisrael. Masha'enki in the Shiva Umes, and Alderez Ibn Megeh Amalek, where there's a chiyuv of Mulchama, there's a Mulchamas Mitzvah, so this musig of Pisech B'Sholem doesn't apply. Masha'enki in the Shittas Rambam is that even the Zayin Umes, even the Mulchamas Mitzvah, even the Zayin Umes, and even the Megeh Amalek, you have to be Pisech B'Sholem, and if they accept Sholem, and with the Tanoim, the Makabel Shev Mitzvah Neneach, and Lamas, V'Avaducha, so then there's no din of Lisachai Kol Neshama. That's the Shittas Rambam. That's what we'll learn here inside. Perik Shishi. Ein oisen Mulchama im Odem Ba'elam ad shekeden le l'sholem. You don't do a Mulchama with anybody Ba'elam ad shekeden le l'sholem, and the din is Echad Mulchamas Rishus, which means the Mulchamas which are outside Eretz Yisrael, Ve'echad Mulchamas Mitzvah, which means the Mulchamas of the Zayin Umis, Al Derez Amalek, Shenamak Yisikre V'ir L'ilachem Olah, V'koresa Olah L'sholem, and that goes on all Ayoris. Now, im hishlimu, if they accepted the shalom, and which means v'kiblu sheva mitzvos nishtav b'nei aleim. So then, in hergim behem neshama, v'harehim lamas shenama yu l'chol lamas v'avaducha. So they have to accept side sheva mitzvos b'nei and also yu l'chol lamas v'avaducha. That's part of the accepting of shalom. Now, kiblu aleim hamas, will he kiblu ha'avdus? Eshekiblu ha'avdus, will he kiblu hamas, which the Ram Taichus assume. What's this mas and what's the avdus? So they have to be makabel the mas and the avdus. If the makabel one, the mas and not the avdus, or the avdus and not the mas, ein shem mulem. Ad sheyikablu shneim, they have to accept upon themselves the mas and the avdus. V'ha'avdus sheyikablu doesn't mean that they should actually be avodim. It means sheyunivzim ushvolim lamata v'liyirimu reish b'Yisrael el yiyu kvushim tachas yodam. They should be subjugated. They shouldn't be like regular citizens. They shouldn't consider themselves regular citizens. They should be people that are nivzim ushvalim lamata, second class. V'lei yismanu al Yisrael l'shum davar be'elim. They shouldn't be in charge of anything al Yisrael. Now the din is bemis, even a ger is not allowed to be memuna al Yisrael. So the question is, what's the kiddush over here? That le yisman al Yisrael, saying even those things that a ger would be allowed, that he's not mamish in charge of something. Also, there shouldn't be a minoy al Yisrael l'shum davar be'elim. You have to know exactly what's the difference of what a ger can do and what they can do. But I'll call upon the Nekudas Advarim is when they say avdus, it means they should be subjugated. I'll directly bring that Yeshua made them into Chet v'Yetzim v'Shei v'Mayim, which were also people that were a lower class people. That's been again the avdus. V'hamas sheyakablu, what's the mas? Shemuchanim lavedas hamelech begufam u'mamenam. They should be ready to work for the king, sai begufam and sai b'mamenam. It's brought down in the Mefarshim that when they work begufam, they're paid for it. Mamenam will soon see that the melech could take from them half of their money, half of their assets. But lapel, when they work for the king, it's not pshat that they work for the king and they don't have to, they don't get paid for it. But on the other end, the melech could force them to work. That's part of being lemas. What does it mean avedus hamelech? And binyan hachemes, v'chizuk hametzudas, and strengthening the fortresses. Ubinyan armin hamelech, his palace, ukiyetzabe shenamar v'zed dvar hamas hashehel hamelech shleimei livnes is beis Hashem, and also v'ez beisei, and v'ez hamiloi. Miloi was an area in Yerushalayim which is surrounded by a wall and was filled with earth. So building that area, v'es chemes Yerushalayim, v'es kol ori hamiskenes asher hayu l'shleimei, and vayalim shleimei lemas oved adeim hazeh. So Shleimei took from these people, and he made them into a mas oved. They had to work for these purposes of building these areas. Bnei Yisrael, he knows Shleimei eved. Shleimei didn't take from the Bnei Yisrael people to work these works, these types of work that he took from them. But rather, what did he take the Yidden for? Came Anshe HaMilchama, Va'avoda, V'sara, V'sholisha, V'sari Richbei, Uparashav. In other words, they were his officers, they were the people that dealt with his chariot, they were the people that rode his horses. In other words, they were the more choshev people. These people were just building the fortress and building the buildings, and from Bnei Yisrael he took the Anshe HaMilchama and the Avodav, etc. So that's the din that, so B'kitzer, when you go to a city, you have to be Pisech L'Sholem, and if they are Mekabel themselves, Shev Mitzvos Neneach, and they're also Mekabel Lamas Va'avaducha, so Ram Saichin Gois Lamas means that they're willing to work for the Melech, Lamas, to work for the Melech, Begufim Momenam, those things that the Melech wants from them, and Va'avaducha means that they'll be subjugated, they'll not consider themselves, they'll consider themselves lower class citizen, so then that's your Pisech L'Shol. V'yesh L'Melech L'Hasnesi Moim, Sheyika Chatzim Amenu. He could take half of their assets, and when you say half of their assets, normally you would say half of the value of their assets. But here it means either their metaltalin or their karka. It means oya karkois v'yaniach kol metaltalin. So that would be chotzi, all their karka and leave their metaltalin. A kol metaltalin v'yaniach karkois. Kfi mashim yasnu as they make up. But I'll call upon that's part of the Melech's rights, and that's part of the peace treaty that they make, that these people are willing to give up half of their assets. And va'asur l'shaka bebrisam u'lechaziv lem achar sheshlimu v'kiblu sheva mitzvahs. Once they accepted themselves the sheva mitzvahs, and once they accepted shalom, so you made up a deal with them, and then asur l'chaziv them, you're not allowed to lie. That's talking about if they're shlima. So you give them the option of shalom, which means accepting the sheva mitzvahs neneach, and lemas va'avaducha. And once you do that, so you asur l'chaziv them. However, v'im le'yishlimu, if they weren't mashlim, they weren't willing to accept the mas v'avaducha, oy yishlimu, abavali kiblu sheva mitzvahs, so then esim mimol milchama, then you do milchama, and v'hergin kol haschorim hagdolim, so all the schorim hagdolim, so you kill, and uboizim kol momenam v'tapam, and you could take as a booty from the milchama, you take all their money and also their children. Ve'in hergin isha v'lei cotton shenamar. Hanoshim v'atav is a tafshil schorim. So the tafshil schorim you don't kill, you take them as avodim, and al derez the noshim you don't kill, but the schorim hagdelim that you kill in this milchama if they don't accept shalom. B'medvar mamurim that you say that if they don't accept the shalom, you go ahead and you kill the schorim and the noshim the taf you leave. That's talking about b'milchamas harishus. When talking Melchemes Rishus, what does it mean Melchemes Rishus? Shehiyim Shar Umis, which is the other nations, not the Zayin Amimim and not Amalek. Aval Shiva Amomin v'Amalek Shleish Limu is Ein Manich Mehem Neshama. Shenamar Kein Tasel Cholorim Rak Mi'ori Amim Leisachaya Kol Neshama. V'chein Uemer v'Amalek Timche Ezecher Amalek. So the Rambam is saying very clearly, B'chlal, all nations you have to open up with peace. And if they accept peace, which means they accept the Sheva Mitzvah Neach, and Al Derez Lamas Vavaducha, you do them nothing. You just accept them. They have peace, and they become Lamas Vavaducha, and you deal with them. Masha'in Kain, if they don't accept peace, so it depends. If we're talking with Shara Umeis, not the Shiva Amomin, and not Amalek, so then you kill all the Schorim, and you leave the Taf and the Noshim, and they're taken as part of the Rechush that you're taking from the Medina. That's part of the Biza. Masha'ekin, if we're talking about the Zayin Amomin or Amalek, so then there's the din is Leisachai Kol Mishama. That's what we're saying. Kein Tas el Chol Arim. The Chol Arim, so then you only kill the Schar. Masha'ekin, the Taf of the Noshim, you keep. Masha'ekin, Ma'ari Amim, which you're going into, the Eretz Yisrael, so over there the din is Leisachai Kol Mishama. Now we mentioned before, the Rambam's Chiddush is that the din of being Pisech B'Shalom applies not only to the nation, to the Amim outside of Eretz Yisrael, but also to the Zayin Amim, which are in Eretz Yisrael, and to Amalek. Now in the Parsha, in the Torah, it says as the Torah tells you that when you go to Milchama, you have to have Pisech B'Shalom. And if they Pisech B'Shalom, so then if they're not Pisech B'Shalom, so then the Chiyuv is to kill out all the Schorim. Masha'inkin, the Tav v'Noshim, you don't kill out. That's what the Torah says. Then the Torah says, but Medvar Mamurim, that this whole thing is talking about the Shar Umis. Masha'inkein, Benigeh, the Sheva Umis, or the Umis which are in Eretz Yisrael, is Leisachai Kol Neshama. Now when the Torah says, Bamedvar Mamurim, is the Bamedvar Mamurim going on the whole Parsha? In other words, the whole Parsha, the whole idea that you have to be Pesach B'Shalom, and that you have to, and if you're not Pesach and yet Pesach, the whole din only applies to other umis. Masha'inkin, the Zayin umis is Leisachai Kol Neshama, there's no din of Pesach B'Shalom. So the Rambam learns not like that. The Rambam learns the first part of the parsha, which tells you have to be Pesach B'Shalom, that applies to all umis, including the Zayin umis. This last prat of the previous parsha, that if they weren't mashlim, so then you go ahead and kill the Schorim, and the Tav v'Noshim you don't kill, So that doesn't apply to the Zainumis. But the first part of the parsha, which tells you you have to go ahead and Piseach b'Shalom, that applies to the Zainumis as well. That's the Shittas Rambam. Now the question is, who says? Well, what's the hechra that that's the pshat? L'chura, you could learn pshat that the whole parsha knows everything that the Torah said until now. B'negeh the din of being Piseach b'Shalom, and then the din of that when they're not Piseach b'Shalom. So then they go ahead and you go to Milcham and there's a ma'isa with a chilik between Scharim and the Kevis. So maybe that whole parsha doesn't apply to the Zayin HaMomen. And by the Zayin HaMomen, there's no Psicha B'Shalom. That's the Rambam Shaila over here. Minayin she'enim medaber el be'elu shlei yishlimu. Maybe, who says that this din of Lisachai Kol Neshama is only going in the last prat? That if Lei Yishlimus, over there is a din that only Scharim and not Nekevis. And by the Zayin HaMomen, there's a din of Scharim and Nekevis. Minayin she'enim medaber el be'elu shlei yishlimu. Shenamar, the pasuk says, "Lehoi seir." The pasuk Yeshua, "Lehoi seir asher shlima as el bnei Yisrael, bilti hachivi yeshvi hagivin." That there was no nation that was hishlima in bnei Yisrael except for the chivi yeshvi hagivin. Es hakel lokchum memulchama kimeis Hashem hoiso lechazik es libam lekrasam mulchama es Yisrael leman hacharimam. So we see clearly from that pasuk that the only reason why Lepel they ended up being machrim all the Amomin is because no one was mashlim. Is miklal sheshol chalem l'sholem v'likiblu. So from here we can understand that they were shol l'sholem, and the only reason why Lepel they were hechrimam is because they weren't mashlim. So from here we see, so that here's the raya that the Rambam has to Yeshita, that even the Zayin HaMomen, you're Piseach b'Sholem, and if they are Piseach, if they're Mashlim, and they take Shev Mitzvah Meach, and they also take Lamas Vavaducha, so then you don't kill them. The din of Lisachai Kol Neshama doesn't apply. Only if they didn't accept, so then there's a din of Lisachai Kol Neshama. Halacha Hey, Shleisha Ksavim Shalach Yeshua actually Nichnas Loros. Yeshua sent 3 letters to the Goyim. Harishin Shalach Lam Misha Reitzel Levrech Yivrach. They were coming, and anyone that runs who wants to run away could run away. Now V'chaz V'Shal, he sent another letter. Misha Reitzel Lahashlim Yashlim. That anyone that wants Lahashlim, it is a Shittas Rambam, which is stims with this din, so Yishalmi, that says Misha Reitzel Lahashlim Yashlim. And then V'chaz V'Shalach Misha Reitzel Asim Mulchama Yaseh. That we're coming to Mulchama. You should know that you have an option of Lahashlim or Misha Reitzel Asim Mulchama, Lasim Mulchama. Now the Ram is asking a kasha on himself. We find the story is that the Yeshvi Given came and they were Mayrim to say that they came Eretz Rechekabanu. Came Pnima Hirimu Yeshvi Given. Why did the Yeshvi Given come and Taina that they were Eretz Recheka and therefore they wanted to make peace with the Yidden? L'chura, they could have said they're Taka from Given and they're from Eretz Yisrael, but Lepel they have an option to make peace. The Rambam is saying that the people of Eretz Yisrael also have an option to make peace. So why did they come Beharam and Taina that Eretz Recheka Banu? So the answer is Lefi Shesholach Lem Beklal. Yeshua didn't send each city a separate message. He sent a general message to the Klolas Dika nation. And the Klolas Dika nation didn't accept. And the people of the various different people in Eretz Yisrael weren't aware of Mishpatei Yisrael. They didn't know that this particular city could be mashlim if they want. And V'dimu, and they thought she'ein Pesachim Lehem L'Sholem. They're not being Pesach Lehem L'Sholem separately. They're only being Pesach L'Sholem to the general population. Lepel, every time before they would attack any nation, they would go ahead and send L'Sholem. But Lepel, when they sent the general letters before Yeshua entered Eretz Yisrael, so they thought that was the end. Either everyone accepts or everyone doesn't accept. And therefore the fact that they made a bris with, that's why they came and they pretended to be from an Eretz Recheka because they weren't aware that even if they say the truth that they're coming from Eretz Yisrael, still, since they're willing to accept Shalom, so maybe they give Shalom. So if that's the case, but there is a musig of Shalom even with people of Eretz Yisrael, is V'lo Mekosha Hadover L'Nesiyim, V'ro Sheroy La'Kes Mufi Cherev Luli Ashvo. So we see that really Be'emes the Nesiyim felt that Be'emes they deserve to be killed. And the only reason why they killed them is because since they promised them that they're not going to do anything to them, so they didn't want to be a Chilul Hashem. L'chura, if the din is according to the Rambam, you could be mashlim. So they thought, the Eden thought that they weren't from Eretz Yisrael, but even if they would have known they're from Eretz Yisrael, they also would have made this treaty with them. So if that's the case, so what's the problem that they made this treaty with them while they were pretending to be from a different place? That's what Rambam is asking. V'lo mekosha adavel l'nesiyim v'ro sheroy la'kes mulficharev luli ashvo mipnei shekorshel ambris Because over here there was a bris. In other words, they're supposed to be accept shalom, and the lemasul avaducha, but they don't make a bris with them. Because now the problem was shekarsul and bris. Really, what should have been is that they should be subjugated. It wasn't a bris. A bris is a covenant between two people that are equal, or two nations that are equal. Over here, we're talking about that they're supposed to become lemas vavaducha, lepel the Yidden with the anshe given that came and pretended to be me'eretz recheka. The Yidden made a bris. Or hail the toys nishbulam b'din hoyesh yehargu al shehitum. So since Lepel they fooled them, and that fooled them caused them to make a bris with them, so therefore they deserve to be killed. But I'll call upon the Nukudas Advarim is that the Rambam holds that Be'emes Yupesech L'Sholem also to Anshe Eretz Yisrael, and Lepel, if Anshe Eretz Yisrael are mashlim, so then there's no din of L'Sechai Kol Neshama. If they're not mashlim, so then there's a din of L'Sechai Kol Neshama. And the problem by Givon was that Givon, first of all, didn't know that they'll still have an option of being mashlim. That's number one. And the reason why the Nesiim felt that they should be killed is because they caused them, of course, through their fooling them and pretending to be from a different place. Therefore, there was a krisis bris with them. And really, with Anshe Eretz Yisrael, Ein Nochinami, they can be mashlim l'sholem, but on the other hand, the musig of a krisis bris is not allowed. At least sichris lembris. Now this all true b'negei all nations except for Amin U'Moav. Amin U'Moav ein sheilchem lem l'sholem. You never send sholem to Amin U'Moav. Shenema leis sidri shleima v'tevasim. So this din that whenever you have a milchama with a nation, you send them l'sholem doesn't apply to Amin U'Moav. Amru Chacham lefi shenema v'karasa oleh l'sholem yochel Amin U'Moav is also came tamid leima leis sidri shleima. Lefi shenema imcha yeshu b'kirbecha b'tevele yochel Amin U'Moav came. Talmud Lema v'Tevasim Lisidrish Shleim v'Tevasim. You're not allowed to accept Amin U'Moav, not to Karosel l'Sholem, and not that they should be sheichen with the Yid, to offer that option of that they should be Batev Leimach. You're not allowed to taka go ahead and offer them Shalom. Im hishlimu mi'atzmon tchila mekabmes. So if they came out, even a Mammon U'Moav, which there's a dinner l'sidr shleima v'tevasam, if they came themselves and they say they're willing to accept Shev Mitzvah Nech, and they're willing to accept Lemas V'Avaduchas, even though that offer is not given to them, but nevertheless, if they come along on their own initiative, and they offer that, so we accept it. The Zohar Pshat, the Rambam is speaking about the din that Amin U'Moav is ein sheilchem lem l'sholem. Now l'chura, Amin U'Moav you're not allowed to have a mulchama with. The pasuk says you're not allowed to have mulchama with Amin U'Moav. So the Shittas HaRambam is the Rambam in the Sharoshim and Sefer HaMitzvahs. Over there he writes that this chiyuv of not having milchama with Amin U'Moav is taka only in the first generation when the Yidden went into Eretz Yisrael. So over there was a chiyuv. It's not a mitzvah which is neig l'deiros. So meila l'deiros there's no isser to have milchama with Amin U'Moav, and then there's a din that when you go ahead to Amin U'Moav is l'sidish shleima v'tevasam. You're not allowed to go ahead and deiros shleima v'tevasam. In other words, you're allowed to have milchama in the subsequent generations, and then there's a issue of l'siddur shleim v'tevasim. That's Shittas HaRambam. The Ravid argues, the Ravid holds that the issur of having milchama with Amin U'Moav is a milchama l'deiros. If there's a milchama l'deiros, so how could there be a issur if the l'siddur shleim, if you're not allowed to have milchama with them? So the answer is that we're talking about in a case where they went ahead and they conquered from the Umas. They conquered from the Zion Amim. So at that point in time, so then there is a chiyuv. In other words, to go ahead to their land and to conquer their land, you're not allowed to. Masha'inkin, if they go ahead and they conquer from the Zion Umas, so then there's a chiyuv to go ahead and conquer their land, and then there's a din of l'sidr shleima v'tevas. That's the Shittas HaRamban in the Sinyan. Halacha Zayin. Shetzorin al ir l'tofsa, is the din is ein makif nesim mi'arba ruchisah. Because you don't surround it completely, the city from all four sides. El misholish ruchisah, umanichem mokim libireach, ulamisha reitzel imolit l'nafshe. Someone that wants to run away, he has where to run away from. He knows they're not completely surrounded. Shenema vayitzbu al midyon kasher tziva Hashem esmeisha. The pasuk doesn't write what kasher tziva is. So maybe Ashmul lamdu shebekach tziva, that there was a special tzivoy, and that's not only over there, but b'chlal, that when you conquer, when you go ahead and have milchama with a city, you shouldn't surround the city from all sides. You should give a place, one side, that the people that want to run away could run away. Halacha ches. Ein koitzitzin iloni Michael shechutz lemedina. You're not allowed to cut an Elon Michael, a fruit-bearing tree, outside the Medina. You can't stop the water flow that goes to the tree, in order for the tree to dry out. You're not allowed to destroy its trees. If you go ahead and cut off a tree that makes fruit, is loike, you get malchus. So that's the thing. You're not allowed to cut off a tree chutz l'medina, the Rambam says. Not only when you're making a siege, anytime you go ahead and cut a fruit-bearing tree, derech hashchasa, you're just destroying it, is leika, you get malchus for cutting this tree. Now, the lepel, the pasuk speaks about in a mulchama. So pastors, according to the Rambam, it's a chidush. In other words, even though lepel, you're cutting the tree in order to prevent the enemy from eating from this tree. In other words, you have a tree which is outside the city, and lepel, there's a concern that the people of the city will go and take fruit from this tree. So you want to cut off this tree so they shouldn't have a source of the fruit of this tree. But nevertheless, since you're doing it derech hashchasa, in other words, you're destroying the tree, even though you have an interest in it. But lepel, you're destroying the tree, so therefore you're not allowed to. So alderos are not to destroy the tree and not to stop off the flow of water. Now the Ramban argues with the Rambam. The Ramban holds that lepel, if you have a benefit from destroying the tree, this benefit is that lepel, the enemy won't be able to get fruit from the tree, then it's permissible. Because you're not allowed to cut off a tree if it's tamazeh, you're cutting off a tree derech hashchasa. But when you're cutting off the tree in order to prevent the enemy from eating from the tree, so that is permissible. And the Rambam argues, the Rambam holds that it's also asur. And that would Mustama explain, according to the Rambam, why it's taka said in that parsha. Why isn't the parsha of the Matzah? Because lepel, the chidush is that even if it's a benefit for you, but lepel, since it's derech hashchasa, it's asur. Now then the Rambam continues, Avol koitzitz neisei, im hoye mazik ilonis acheres. In other words, if this tree is hurting other trees, im ipnei shemazik b'sdei acherim, or it's causing, the roots of it is going into other fields and causing damage, im ipnei shadom of yikarim, or even if the tree, the wood of the tree is worth a lot of money, and you want to cut the tree off for the wood, and the wood is worth more than the fruit, the isser is only for destruction. In other words, to cut off a fruit-bearing tree in a destructive manner, that's asur. Masha'inkin, if you're doing it not in a destructive manner, so that's mutter. So here you have to be mechalik. In other words, according to the Ramban, whenever there's a benefit from cutting off this tree, whether the benefit is that you're going to have more wood from it, or the benefit is that you're going to prevent the enemy from eating from the tree, that's also considered not destructive. You're doing it for the benefit. According to the Rambam, if the benefit is mamish from the tree, you have to be mechalik. In other words, if the benefit is from the tree itself, in other words, you're cutting off the tree because this tree is causing harm, directly causing harm, it's hurting other trees, it's hurting someone else's field, or this tree has wood, which lepel, the wood is beneficial for you, more than the fruit. So over here, that's not called destructive. Masha'inkin, if you're destroying the tree in order for other people not to benefit from the tree, that's considered destructive. In other words, the fact that other people will benefit from the tree, and that's to your detriment, that's not called that it's not destructive. You're doing a destructive act, which lepel for you is a benefit. Masha'inkin, the Ramban holds vaistuis, not like that. The Ramban holds that as long as lepel, you're having a benefit from destroying it, not just destructive. You're destroying it in order for the enemy not to be able to take from the tree. That would be permissible. So that would be an afkemina b'negei this inyan. Some people want to tie it that there would be a chiluk l'mashal. What would be the din? Are you allowed to cut off, which is a shaila in poskim? Are you allowed to cut off a tree in order to be able to use the place of the tree to build something? Whereas you want to build a building, and there's a fruit-bearing tree over there. The question: are you allowed to cut off the fruit-bearing tree in order to be able to build a building? So again, over here you're cutting off the tree. Because the cutting off the tree, there's no mile in it. The mile is only lepel. You're going to be able to use the land. In the case where the tree itself you're going to use, or lepel, the tree is hurting something. So then we say that's called constructive. So that could be totally in the machlekes between the Rambam and the Ramban. In other words, if you hold like the Rambam holds, that lepel, even when lepel, you're preventing the enemy from being able to eat from the tree, but that's called destructive. So over here also lepel, since you're cutting off this tree, so even though you're going to have a zaitika benefit, which is you can be able to use this area for building a building, but nevertheless lepel right now is a destructive act. Masha'inkin, according to the Ramban, lepel, just like the Ramban holds that when you cut off a tree in order for the enemy not to eat from it, that's considered constructive. So if you cut off a tree in order to be able to use that area, so that's also called constructive. It could be you could be machalik between the two in Yonim, but that's some people are being medama. The Rambam Aruch speaks about this, brings the 2 days beneged this inyan, whether or not you could go ahead and cut off a tree in order to build in the place of the tree. Halacha tes. Kol ilon srak, if it's an ilon srak which is not a fruit-bearing tree, is mutter lokatzeh. So you're allowed to cut off an ilon srak. It's not like you need the ilon srak in order to destroy a tree, even though it's also a live tree. But if it's a tree that doesn't make fruit, so there's no problem of cutting it off. Ilon Michael, she his skin, an ilon Michael which is very old and mele veina esa eladova muat she'ena royal trail, but it uses it bears very minimum amount of fruit, and it's really not kedai, even the tircha which is involved in picking this fruit for the fruit that you're going to get is mutal lekutze. You're allowed to go ahead and cut off this tree. In other words, this tree, even though it was originally a fruit-bearing tree, but now it's already old and it's not really making any fruit, so it's considered as if it's an ilon srak. If you have an olive tree, how many olives does the olive tree have to make in order to be considered a fruit-bearing tree? If this tree produces a fourth of a kav of zaysim, which is a 24th of a saw of zaysim, so that would be considered a fruit-bearing tree, and therefore you're not allowed to cut it off stamazay. That would have a din of an eitz michael, and you can only cut it off like you cut off an eitz michael. And the dekel shu'es a kav tomorrow, a dekel which is a palm tree which makes a kav of dates, is also lei kutsera. That's considered a fruit-bearing tree. But if it's less than that, it's considered like an ilon srak, and therefore you could cut it as you would cut an ilon srak. Now, this din was saying you're not allowed to cut a fruit-bearing tree. So you're saying v'leya ilonis bulvat. This isser of destroying something which is useful doesn't only apply to trees. Elikola mishaber kelim, or v'kareya b'godim, or v'heres binyan, or v'seisam mayin. There's all these type of destructive acts. Uma'abed machola, so he's ma'abed food. Derech hashchose, just destructively, is aver b'lisashches. He's aver on this isser of lisashches. However, to actually get malchus is only when you cut off a fruit-bearing tree. When a person does any other destructive acts, so then he's also aver on lisashches. Halacha Yudalef. Tzorn ala yores hagoyim shleishi yomim lifnei haShabbos. Ve'eisen limoy mulchama b'Shabbos. So the din is that when you go ahead and start a siege on a city, it says you should start 3 days before Shabbos. It means you should start on Tuesday. So there should be 3 full days before Shabbos. And the reason is because when the soldiers start a siege, so there's an uncomfortableness. The first few days, they're very strongly uncomfortable. And therefore, they don't want that Shabbos, they should go in with that uncomfortableness. Masha'enkin, if they already started 3 days before Shabbos, so therefore that uncomfortableness of the beginning of a siege is not there. So that's why Tzorn ala yores hagoyim shleishi yom lifnei haShabbos ve'eisen limoy mulchama b'Shabbos. On Shabbos you could also do mulchama. Notice eisen limoy mulchama says b'chol yom. Some gears says eisen limoy mulchama b'chol yom va'afilu b'Shabbos. Shenama adridato. So we learn out va'afilu b'Shabbos. Even on Shabbos you can make mulchama, and that applies bein mulchamas mitzvah bein mulchamas rishus. So notice even though the mulchamas rishus, what's the must to do the Milchama b'Shabbos, so the din is not like that. So since you're going out the Milchemes Rishus, so to make the siege, you have to wait, you have to do this 3 days before Shabbos. Mashenkin, the Milchama itself could be Shabbos as well. Now, Lepeil, it's brought down, the Mishnah says in Hilchos Shabbos and Perek Beis, that a Milchemes mitzvah, you could start the siege even on Shabbos. You don't have to wait the 3 days before Shabbos. And the Milchemes mitzvah, this din doesn't apply. The Rambam is here, it's not so clear. The Rambam has a general din. Tzorn ala yoros hagoyim shleishi yom lifnei haShabbos, and v'ois neimon mulchama even b'Shabbos. I'll call upon him. So that's the halach over here, that the siege should begin 3 days before Shabbos. We're saying the Lech Mishnah says that it only applies by mulchamas mitzvah, and that the mulchama could be on Shabbos, and that could be even by a mulchamas or rishus. Halacha Yud Beis. Kshechoinen, when the anshe mulchama are choinen b'mulchama, they go out to war and they're choinen in a certain area, is choinen b'chol makom. In other words, they don't have to worry about where there's be choinen. They could go on private property as well and be choinen in this mulchama. That's din number one. And din number two, misha nerag b'ulachama, a person that's killed in war, is memokim she'yipol sham yikaver. Keinim mekeimek kimes mitzvah. So since people are osik b'mulchama, a mes mitzvah is a person that doesn't have who to be mekaberim. Mashenkin over here, since people are asuk b'mulchama, so therefore he has a din of a mes mitzvah, and therefore he's keinim mekeimek, and he's nikber b'mekeimek, even if it's someone else's property. Now, v'arbo dvarim potru b'machna. There was four things that Chazal instituted that it's potter while you're in the tzava. One thing is oichlin admais. Even though the Chazal instituted that there's a issa to eat dmai, which is something that comes from Namoritz, and it's a suffix tevel. Suffix maybe you weren't mafresh meiser, but nevertheless b'mulcham b'machne is mutter b'dmai. That's the number one. And also upturin mechitzes yadayim b'tchila. And the chiyuv of mechitzes yadayim of netil's yadayim lifnei asuda is also potter. And also, umiviin kol mini eitzim and kol makom, when they need wood, they could go ahead in the surrounding areas, even if it's private property, they could go ahead and take wood. Va'afilu motzim klushin v'yaveshim, which normally you're not supposed to take klushin v'yaveshim. You could only take something that's moist and something which was really unimportant, which obviously the person would really not be makbid on. But over here, since we're talking about the machna, so they could go ahead in the surrounding areas and take even wood which was tolush and yavish. And also, that's a third thing. And also, v'chein pturin mila'ariv erev chatzeres b'machna. So there's a din of eruv chatzeres that if you have a separate Rosh Hashanah and you have a communal Rosh Hashanah, so you can't take out from the separate Rosh Hashanah to the communal Rosh Hashanah or from one Rosh Hashanah to the other Rosh Hashanah, unless there is a eruv chatzeres, and that doesn't apply b'machna. That's v'chein pturin mila'ariv eruv chatzeres b'machna. El metaltal and me'ele and mesukah l'sukkah, they could go, whereas in the machna, they wouldn't have regular houses, they would have tents. So mainly you're allowed to be metaltal from one tent to another tent, or from one sukkah to the other sukkah. Whereas the machna, if it's not surrounded by mechitza of asarat tvachim, doesn't have a din of a shus hayochid. So mainly you're not allowed to be metaltal there. I mean, at the very best, it has a din of a karmelis. And they weren't matter the tiltled from a shus hayochid to a karmelis. They were matter only the isser of the din of eruv chatzeres, which is rishus hayochid to rishus hayochid, which normally needs a eruv chatzeres. Nachmal v'hu she'akifu kol hamachna mechitza gvei asarat tvachim kedei shetir rishus hayochid k'meishin isbor b'hilchos Shabbos. And the ein machna, to be considered a machna, which is potter from all these things that we just mentioned, the arba dvarim, the ein machna pchusim yasar. Uksheim shepturim koleilim alichosim, when they're going to war, is kach pturim b'chazirasim, when they're coming back from the war, so they're also potter. So we're learning over here. There's a din that first of all the machna of the mulchama could be chena b'chol mokim. There was a din that when someone was narag, his kena mekeme, his nikbar b'mekeme like a mas mitzvah. And then we learned that there's four things that they were mater b'machna. The four things they were machna is, first of all, you could eat demai. There's no chiyuv of rechitzes yadayim tchila. The tils yadayim tchila, there's no chiyuv. There's no din of you're allowed to go ahead and take eitzim, which are yeveshim and klushim, and use them, even though normally you wouldn't be allowed to. And also, there's no din of eruv chatzeres, as long as the place is rishus hayochid. And in order for it to be considered a machna, it has to be at least 10 soldiers. Halacha Yudalet, v'aser lihiponis b'techa machna. When the soldiers have to relieve themselves, so then they can't go ahead and just relieve themselves in the middle of the machna with everybody there. Just on the place of the field, in an open area. Ela mitzvah saseh l'sakin derech sham miyuchedes lihiponis sham. That they should have an area, a side area, which is out of the way. I know there's a derech sham, I know there's an aside place which is not an open area, and that place is the place where the soldiers should relieve themselves. Shnemer v'yoda tia lecham mechutz lamachna. There should be an area which is outside of the camp, and over there is the place where the people that have to relieve themselves have to go and relieve themselves. V'chein mitzvah saseh. Besides that, there's also another mitzvah saseh. Lies yosid l'cholechad v'echad tluyim klei mulchamte. That together with the other things that he uses for the war, he should also have a utensil, which is like a shovel type of utensil, which he should be hanging together with his other klei mulchamte. And when he goes to that place where he relieves himself, and after he relieves himself, so he goes v'yachber ba v'yipona v'yichasis. So he goes ahead and digs in the earth in order that the human waste that goes into that area where he dug, and then he goes ahead and digs again, and he covers the waste that came out of his body. Shneimar v'yosid tia l'chol azinecha. He should have a shovel together with your other tools, and that should be whether they have the Aron HaKedesh, or sometimes you go out to war with the Aron HaKedesh. So then, at that point in time, so you have to be worried to cover the Aron HaKedesh. But when you don't have the Aron HaKedesh, there will be a svara that at that point in time it's not negay really all these zihirusin of a hoya machnecha kodesh. So that he says no. Ben sheyeshi moim aron, ben shnei moim aron. Whether the aron is there or not, kachem esatamin shnam of hoya machnecha kodesh. Your machne should be holy, and therefore those things that are done, which you're not allowed to say a davar should be kedusha when human waste is just open in the area. So that should be done all on the side, and it should also be covered up.